Greetings and salutations, loyal viewers of this channel. Today we are going to discuss a debate or discussion, however you want to call it, between Stephen Destiny Bonnell and Sam Seder. And the reason we're going to go over this is because Sam Seder clearly and obviously got destroyed. He got exposed as the weasel that he is. And of course, it's all about him spreading misinformation or framing information inaccurately or deceptively, more likely, in a way to attack Kyle Rittenhouse because he's a petty child who doesn't like to admit when the left was 100% wrong about the clearest, most obvious case of self-defense that was caught wire to wire on video. It's a great video. I highly recommend it. I will link it in the description of this video so you guys can check it out. But without further ado, well, actually with some further ado, because we have a sponsor, we're going to throw it over to them and then we'll talk about this on the other side. Weight loss is a near universal struggle in the United States of America, and one of the reasons why is because your metabolism slows down about 4% a decade after you hit the age of 20. This is one of the reasons why I recommend my secret weapon, which is of course Keto with Justice. This wonderful keto powder elevates the number of ketones in your body, which thus gives you some of the advantages of the keto diet without you actually having to be on the full keto diet. I recommend it as a supplement for the diet or on its own. It helps boost your metabolism, and if you go to ketowithjustice.com, you can try this for 60 days, full money back guarantee. You can't beat that. If it doesn't work, just send it back and get your money back. If it does work, then you're awesome, and you're gonna lose weight, and you're gonna look fit as hell. Now, the basis for this video that we're talking about is a petty, sad, pathetic video from Sam Seder about Kyle Rittenhouse, and how he was supposedly spreading misinformation, and how Sam Seder wanted to tell you over and over again that Kyle Rittenhouse was a man who killed two people.
And let's be clear, he killed them with a gun. I mean, and to be clear, a jury found him not guilty of murder or any other charges. I think he just gets to walk free after killing two. This is
still killed people.
And let's be clear, he's obviously attempting to go after the defamers out there. So I want to be very clear. He killed two people with a gun. He killed two people with a gun. You know who is not going to be able to get a job or walk their dog or have really any sense of normalcy since Kyle killed them with his weapon are the people that he killed.
Or even the guy he maimed and shot his arm off, basically.
Now, technically, parts of the Sam Seder original video are in fact true. Kyle Rittenhouse did kill two people. However, the issue that Stephen had with this video, and that anybody with half a brain had with this video, was the fact that Sam was saying just that Kyle killed two people without the overall context, thus framing it as something that it was not, aka an obvious self-defense case. On top of that, Sam was clearly and obviously doing that because he's against Rittenhouse, and he promotes Kyle Rittenhouse conspiracy theories about him being an evil white nationalist, about him looking for the fight, when all of that is contradicted by the video. There's a portion of his video where he reads a message from somebody out there in the audience, and the message was as follows.
The communists' opinion is that Kyle Rittenhouse did not go to protect a business. He went to intimidate left-wing protesters for Black lives. This is what white supremacist paramilitaries have done since Ferguson. Rittenhouse was acting like a Hitler youth with a full confidence of a 1960 Mississippi Klansman policing a civil rights march. Let's not push the right strategic lies. I mean, I think that's, I was just going along, but I understand your point. And that is a valid opinion in my estimation. All right. That is a valid opinion in my estimation. All right.
I mean, I buy that. I also think like just stating his explicit motivations was like, I killed to defend property. Like that's what he said. That is like, to me, like that's the formula for fascism.
Right.
Now, Sam says he agrees with that message, and when confronted with that, of course, he shifts to, oh, well, that's somebody else saying it. But again, Sam is the one who brought that message up on the show, and then said that that's a totally valid, agreeable position that you could have, even though that is completely contradicted by the facts.
But given how many people say he killed black people, he was a white nationalist, the guy that called into your show said that he was an I think he compared him to Hitler Youth policing civil rights marches, and I think you said that was a valid point. When he's being cast in that light over and over and over again, I don't think it's very surprising that he's going to run into the arms of people on the right that are going to embrace him as a hero, especially given how much is factually incorrect about what's being stated about him. How many times people say that he killed people in defense of property, which wasn't true. How many times people are willing to downplay the other protesters. You keep mentioning the third guy that was maimed. That guy got maimed running up to Rittenhouse with a Glock that he was going to shoot him with.
First off, when that guy IM'd me in that video, it was in response to this guy's conservative media tour. Okay? I am not responsible for the nameless people that you're telling me have spread misinformation.
That is a valid opinion, in my estimation. All right.
The idea that Kyle Rittenhouse went down there so that he could kill people, but only coincidentally killed people who tried to attack him on video and reach for his gun to take it away from him, that posed an imminent threat to him, doesn't make any sense. You'd have to make the argument that Kyle was somehow mind controlling these people into attacking him just so he could execute his perfectly thought of plan of killing protesters, but only specifically the ones that attacked him, and of course he only used the shots necessary to stop the ones that were attacking him, including the guy who pulled a gun on him, who he didn't shoot after he shot first and wounded him. But whatever, it's not a big deal. Sam Seder says that's a perfectly valid position because Kyle Rittenhouse is a bad person. Now, what they actually start on in this debate, and I think this is incredibly important, is the Jacob Blake case, which Sam Seder doesn't want to touch because the lies from Jacob Blake are what fueled the Kenosha riots. And if you guys don't remember these lies, it was that Jacob Blake was just an innocent guy who was breaking up a fight when all of a sudden the police were called, not even for him, for the fight, and the police, for no reason at all whatsoever, shot Jacob Blake 7 times in the back, and according to Sam Seder, he was killed.
You can argue that the Kenosha, protests were set off by, Blake's killing.
Blake's shooting, right?
Shooting, sorry.
But in reality, Jacob Blake was actually paralyzed by this incident. Now, we covered this a bunch of times on this channel. First and foremost, Jacob Blake was the person they called the cops on. They named him full name first and last, meaning that the person who called the cops thought that the police would know who Jacob Blake was because she was saying, Jacob Blake is here, he's trying to steal my car, he's threatening me, all that stuff.
Booker didn't want him to leave with her rental car and called the police.
Today is his son's birthday, so I allowed him to spend a couple hours with him, but he's not giving me the keys to this rental, and that's all I'm asking for.
And then it says Jacob Blake isn't supposed to be there, and he took the complainant's keys and is refusing to get them back.
She decided that she didn't want me to take her car, the rental car. And I'm explaining to her, my truck is in the shop. So I decided not to give her the keys. It was in her name.
On the way to the scene, officers are told there's a warrant for Blake on domestic violence offenses and sexual assault.
We have an alert at this address for 99 for that subject.
And the reason why she had every right to call the police, other than the fact of what Jacob Blake was doing in that moment, is that after years of abuse at the hands of Jacob Blake, she actually filed a restraining order against him, and Blake was in violation of that. On top of that, despite what people out there in the left-wing media will tell you about the police just shooting him in the back as he was breaking up a fight going into a car, they actually tried to physically restrain Jacob Blake, they tried to tase him, and none of that worked. So Jacob Blake, this person who has a felony warrant against him, who was in violation of a restraining order, was getting into a car with children in the back of that car that he had no right to take, in a car that he had no right to take, to flee on a felony warrant. So if you're the police in this situation, do you let this fleeing felon flee on a police chase with children in the backseat of the car, or do you stop him with lethal force if necessary? Because again, when you're fleeing from the police on a felony with children in the back of a stolen car that you're attempting to steal right in front of them, that is obviously a clear and obvious deadly threat to those children, and Jacob Blake could have got himself and all of those children killed in that situation. That is never reported by the left wing. They don't mention it. They just say Jacob Blake, innocent person. At the time, he just broke up a fight. The police were evil white racists, whatever, and thus the Kenosha riots happened. Now, I do want to say and be critical of Destiny for not pressing Sam Seder on acknowledging the fact that it was not legitimate for them to be rioting in Kenosha over Jacob Blake. I wanted him to get him to acknowledge the facts of the case, or we could see if Sam Seder was going to weasel, duck, dodge, and deny the facts of the case. Because, of course, even in this instance where Destiny was bringing up that it was not justified, Sam Seder had an odd take about a friend that he knew back in Hollywood in 15 years ago who got pulled over a couple of times, and then this phone call that definitely 100% happened.
And I guess he's paralyzed. And you could argue that it was just that, without any of the context of the protests that have been going on across the country and the building, literally decades. I mean, I would tell this story for years on my show. When I was in straight entertainment, I did a sitcom called The Show. And it was a white head writer on an all-black variety show. And one of the guys I worked with was a guy named Chris Spencer. And Chris, we went back to his house at a break during shooting or rehearsal or whatever it was. And we pull into his garage in West Hollywood. And we get followed as we come in by his buddy in a Range Rover. And at that time, that was like if you were successful in LA, you had a Range Rover. And this was in the mid 90s. And the guy comes in, he's like, thank God you were there. I was being followed by the cops again for the 4th time this week, because they pulled me over 3 times to check and see if this was my car. And he said he had called the police department and spoke to a sergeant and was like, is there a sticker I can get that says this is my car? And the cop said, are you black? And he said, yes. And he said, there's really nothing I can do for you. And so, I mean, this has been going on, well, far before that.
Now, what that has to do with the unparalleled Black Lives Matter rioting, only Sam Seder knows, but they moved on shortly after that to the Kyle Rittenhouse case, where essentially Sam Seder went hyper-specific and said, I didn't say anything factually wrong, therefore, Destiny's criticism of him made no sense.
You can frame it in the way that you want to frame it. I'll frame it in the way that I want to frame it. You agree that nothing I'm saying is not factually correct, which is what you start out by saying. It's factually correct. It's not just that it's horse paste. I'm saying it's horse paste, and it's also in different doses for other diseases. Ivermectin is used, and you don't like the fact that I'm saying it technically, because my emphasis is this guy made a shitty mistake that ended up in costing 2 people their lives, and he now is going out and monetizing it. It's fucking gross. And you and I can disagree on that, but nothing I'm saying is factually incorrect whatsoever.
It's not just.
Now, again, these are clearly and obviously weaselly tactics from Sam Seder saying, well, I specifically only talked about the fact that he killed 2 people. I skipped a bunch of other steps. I talked about the maiming of the other person, but I didn't mention that that other person had a gun, even though I'm pretending that my objection in this scenario is that Kyle Rittenhouse had a gun, not that Kyle Rittenhouse was apparently allegedly conservative, which, by the way, at some point later on, Sam Seder says, oh, look, there is evidence he's conservative, therefore he's somehow guilty.
Thing will happen over and over again, where one side of the media, the right or the left, will massively come out and just totally shit on some dude, and then 2 weeks later they're like, oh my god, I can't believe he ran to the other side. Like the Rittenhouse stuff on day one with
the other side. Well, you know, if you're so adept at rural areas, you tell me what side he was on.
Well, he just seemed like a kid that liked his community. He seemed like a normal dude. That's what he looked like. Every video.
You tell me, you know so much about rural areas. You tell me what side this kid who's 17, who's got this weapon, what side is he on?
I don't think being 17 with an AR. Hold on, wait, what do you mean? What side? He's an American citizen that has a gun that lives in a rural area. Yeah, he's probably conservative, but he's not a white nationalist. He's not like a crazy, bloodthirsty, anti-civil rights, murdering, crazy dude. Like,
and whatever, but specifically, I was just saying coincidentally that he killed 2 people. Now, this goes on back and forth for a while, and Sam Seder, again, trying to weasel out of the fact that he won't acknowledge nor communicate the facts to his audience, starts saying, oh, well, we just disagree on this. We just disagree on this. But again, this is not something to be disagreed over. You can talk about how, oh, he shouldn't have been there. First of all, none of those rioters should have been there. That was the point that Destiny was making by bringing up the Jacob Blake case, bringing up the curfew, bringing up all that stuff. You could say, oh, I didn't want him to have a gun there, whatever, doesn't matter, totally irrelevant. You're allowed to open carry in the state of Wisconsin. What matters is what went down in the situation. And if you report it as Kyle Rittenhouse just killed 2 people at a protest, at a left-wing protest, or at a Black Lives Matter protest, your audience is not informed about what's going on in that situation. It's just a fact, and that's what Destiny was calling out. Yet Sam Seder was like, no, and then Destiny gave him this example.
If I said that George Floyd died after being arrested for trying to buy something with counterfeit money with fentanyl in his system, do you think that that's okay to say? even though factually everything I just said was correct? Or would you say, well, hold on, the framing here is a little bit dishonest? Because if you say that, you know what, that's fine, it's all factually correct, then I guess we agree on everything. That's fine. You can just say whatever you want, I guess. As long as you're picking the right facts and they don't happen to be incorrect.
That George Floyd had fentanyl in his system?
Yeah.
And that's why he died?
He died with fentanyl in his system. Could have been an OD, maybe. Don't know 100%.
I mean, I think we know the coroner's report.
You know the coroner's report. We don't know 100% how much fentanyl contributed to him dying. We know that he got arrested there because I think he was trying to buy some of the counterfeit money.
Yeah, we know what the but-for was, right? The but-for was the knee on his neck. But yes, he did have fentanyl in his system. I don't think that's a reason to be killed.
But sure, I'm not saying it's a reason to be killed. But if I were to only report on those types of facts, which a lot of conservatives did, even though it's all factually correct, I still think you'd have an issue with the framing. Much the same that I have an issue with your framing when you're saying he went to go and protect stores because somebody might steal some Skittles, and he killed 2 people with his gun to protect some stores. They weren't just Skittles that were on fire that night, and he didn't kill people protecting stores. He killed people that tried to kill him.
I mean, the minutia in which you're taking issue with, like my issue with someone saying that George Floyd, had fentanyl in his blood to the extent that I take issue with that, has to do with their intent. And their intent in that is to underplay the idea of police brutality and the way that black people are policed in this country.
Sometimes you have to stand in awe about how unprepared somebody is for a conversation that they're having. Here you had Sam Seder for the longest time saying, well, when I said Kyle Rittenhouse killed 2 people, that's still technically accurate. So me leaving out all the other context, no big deal. Don't question my intent. I was just being accurate. And if you question the fact that I'm giving you the most narrowest, biased portion of the facts of the case for political reasons, you question my motive, then whatever, that's on you. You're projecting that onto me. But immediately, when Destiny gives him a hypothetical example of somebody saying George Floyd died after he tried to pay with the counterfeit $20 bill, when he was in police custody, when he had fentanyl in his system, Sam Seder says, I will question the intent of the person delivering that information in that way. What's hilarious about Sam Seder's dumbfounded reaction to being caught in this trap right here on video for all of us to see is that the example that Destiny gave, there actually is a valid reason to bring up the fact that Floyd had fentanyl in his system, and this is what the trial was primarily about, the idea that he might have OD'd, and there is evidence to lead to that suggestion. That being said, the coroner is clear, the coroner for Hennepin County, that it was a death due to the fact that they had complications from the restraint. That's what's in the report, that's what the jury believed, that's why Officer Chauvin was convicted, but in this case, you had pills that contained fentanyl in the backseat of the police car that had Floyd's saliva on it, so it would lead people to believe that Floyd was somebody who was swallowing pills before the police pulled him over. So you actually do have some support that it was a contributing factor, even though ultimately what the jury ended up deciding, what the coroner ended up testifying to, was that Floyd died due to complications and neck restraint during the course of his arrest. So the Floyd framing that is actually proposed by Destiny, suggested to Sam Seder, which would make him immediately question the intent of the person delivering that information, is actually fairer to the circumstances of the case that they're talking about than Sam Seder's framing of Kyle Rittenhouse just seemingly randomly, I guess, killing 2 people for no reason with his gun, not even mentioning self-defense, not even mentioning that the person that ended up being wounded by Kyle was armed himself, and all of that. On top of that, you could tell that Sam Seder really has no case to make because he kept trying to do a guilt by association after the fact with one John Doyle.
He's just a kid with
John Doyle. What do you think about that? I don't know that much about John Doyle, but everything I've read isn't terribly good. What do you think about that?
I don't know. When you say
John Doyle because the media was mean to him, why didn't he like somebody else?
I don't know.
John Doyle is virulent.
This sounds like when my mom says that, like, oh, Obama is a terrorist because he was friends with Bill Ayers when he was younger, and Bill Ayers is part of the Weather Underground. I don't know what a 17-year-old's interest is in John Doyle. I do know that people went through all of his social media and every account he's ever posted on, didn't find anything racist, didn't find anything horrible, didn't find any anti-BLM. I'm pretty sure they found pro-BLM stuff on his shit. Maybe he's really good at hiding it. He just knew he was going to blow up into international coverage, so he managed to scrub all of it. But what is this John Doyle thing? What is the tie to Rittenhouse and John Doyle? Can you tell me? Like, how are you so convinced that he's so bought into, like, whatever white nationalists or crazy stuff the John Doyle guy is presenting?
You hear this audio?
No, I don't. What is the audio? And also, wait, is this pre or post shooting?
This is him on some Blaze show saying how much he loves John Doyle, and then John Doyle coming out and giving him a hug.
Okay, so this is post-shooting. Post-shooting, it wouldn't surprise me if this guy became friends with every right-leaning person in the world.
Now look, I've met John Doyle more than a few times. The idea that he's a white nationalist is dramatically overstated by Sam Seder, and what's funny is that he brings up a quote related to John Doyle about him saying that you should defend churches or crisis pregnancy centers from leftists that might attack it, and somehow that equals white nationalism. So even Sam Seder's evidence doesn't make any sense.
John Doyle's not just right-leaning. I mean, this guy, guard and protect your local church, guard and protect your local pregnancy, call them in advance, bring rifles and men with you, or we can just keep talking, whichever you'd like. That's a quote from John Doyle.
Wait, what was necessarily wrong with that quote?
He's threatening pregnancy centers with guns.
On top of that, Kyle Rittenhouse is a young guy. He's aged 19 by now. He was 17 at the time of the shooting, 18 when he did the Blaze interview, and John Doyle is someone around 23, something like that. He's definitely a significantly younger person than myself. So the idea that Kyle would end up getting embraced by John Doyle, and therefore that means that what he did a year prior to this embrace somehow makes him guilty doesn't make any sense at all. It's guilt by association after the fact. It's not evidence of anything. Again, if a left-wing person were in a situation where they were being maliciously prosecuted by a right-wing prosecutor and leftists ended up befriending that person, supporting that person, Sam Seder wouldn't say, oh, well, he did it because he's a communist, is somehow this very valid opinion when he didn't appear to show any dramatic political opinions prior to that incident. Kyle Rittenhouse's history was scrubbed up and down by the prosecutor, by their independent auditor, by the FBI, and they found no link to any ideologically based violent organizations or anything like that.
The second thing is the idea that he's killing people to defend property. That isn't true either. He didn't kill anybody in defense of property.
Why did he show up there with a gun?
Ostensibly, as you've said, to protect property.
Okay. What do you do with a gun to protect property?
You would shoot people.
Okay.
But he didn't shoot people protecting property. If I take a gun with me to a bar and I go to drink and somebody tries to assault me,
if you go to a bar to protect the bar from people coming in, and you know there's people coming in, and you fire at them, I mean, that's what you're doing.
I agree if that was the case, but Rittenhouse wasn't shooting at people defending property. He shot at people that shot at him first and attacked him.
He's patrolling around with a gun.
Yeah, but that's you have a Second Amendment right in the United States to have a firearm, and that's his community as much as any other protester.
So what we have here on tape for us from Destiny is proof that Sam Seder is 100% a weasel. He can't argue against the self-defense case, which is why he never even mentioned self-defense in his initial video. He never even said, oh, here's why his self-defense doesn't work. And you also have him being a buffoon, trying to defend the state's lines argument, which makes no sense at all, and is not even true.
It's repeated a lot. I've heard it on your show quite a few times. This idea that like Rittenhouse drove over state lines or he drove to a neighboring city. His dad lived in that city. He worked there as a lifeguard. It was like a 20-minute drive. I don't think I think he had just as much right to be in that community as literally any other protester there.
I mean, the fact is, it was a neighboring town. It was a different state. I mean, people are saying it to make the point that what is his investment in this? I also think that it's a point, but it's a minor one. I don't think it's a huge point. I don't think that I ever made a big deal of it. It's possible that people overplayed that in a way that was, I don't know, I guess in your mind prejudicial towards him. But that's not. I mean, I'm agnostic as to that. I mean, it's certainly accurate to say, but if you think it gives the wrong impression of what he was doing there, okay.
Yeah, well, so like things that you've said that are like kind of true, but like a little bit like, so he killed 2 people with a gun because he killed people and went to a neighboring town to kill people. Like the characterization is kind of strange that he's like driving to a neighboring town. Like it's pretty common that people's communities, especially in rural areas, are in other areas.
From a different town in a different state. He went down to protect either because he saw it on Facebook or because his friend said to protect a car dealership. That's what I said. And then he killed people, which he did.
True. Then also,
So first of all, you know for sure, we gotta play the Cross State Lines compilation. That being said, I'm gonna hold off on that for a moment so you guys can understand that this whole idea that Kyle crossed state lines with a firearm, or even crossed state lines that day to go to the riot, is just not true. He was already in Kenosha because he worked there, he was cleaning graffiti there. He was staying at his friend's house the night before. They saw on the news that the rioting was going on, which was terrible, and Sam Seder was consistently downplaying because, again, he's a weasel.
Now, I understand why people find it really hard to believe that this guy was so concerned with someone else's store that he had never met or seen. I mean,
It's odd.
it is odd. It is, and the idea that it was like, the specifics of the protest, that wasn't the issue. I was just concerned that somebody might go in and steal, some Skittles.
So then they decided that they were going to defend their own community. So the idea that Kyle traveled to Kenosha, Wisconsin with the intent of even attending the riot is just flat false on its face. The gun never traveled across state lines. Not that that's a crime on its own anyway.
Wouldn't go out of his way to go to a protest, who crossed state lines. He drove from Illinois to Kenosha, Wisconsin. Now again, he drove from Illinois to Wisconsin. It's not like he was in his front yard and he was approached by a group of individuals who posed an imminent threat to his life. He drove across state lines in a state that he doesn't even live in, because obviously we're dealing with a 17-year-old from out of state, and then he crossed state lines with it. He crossed state lines, meaning he traveled across state lines. He traveled there from out of state, who again traveled across state lines. So he did not cross state lines with an illegal gun.
So Sam Seder trying to defend the state's lines argument, trying to say, oh, he came from outside the community, whatever, is just more proof of what a weasel he is. Just like Sam Seder trying to run cover for the people who allege that Kyle Rittenhouse killed people over property when that is clearly and obviously not the case. Rittenhouse went down to the riot. They were trying to make sure that things didn't pop off. That's why he was rendering medical care. Multiple witnesses testified in the trial that he bandaged their wounds, etc., because Kyle was seeking out people to help. On top of that, he brought the gun to protect himself. That has been stated multiple different times. It is clear and obvious why you would bring a gun to protect yourself during the course of the most violent riots in American history. Kenosha was particularly violent, and he only attacked people that posed an imminent threat to him. Joseph Rosenbaum, the convicted pedophile that charged Kyle Rittenhouse, reaching for his gun, got so close to the gun that the muzzle actually burned his hand, meaning he was lunging for it. And by the way, this is caught on video. If he would have got that gun, he posed an imminent threat to other people. If you're open carrying a gun, which by the way was legal, then you have a moral obligation to not let people disarm you who have no right to disarm you, because Rosenbaum could have used that on him, other people, and it would have put a lot more people in danger. On top of that, if you're somebody like Joseph Rosenbaum and you're charging at Kyle Rittenhouse without provocation, without justification, which is what he did, by the way, then you obviously see the gun. So you obviously have a plan in your mind for what you're going to do with the gun. And Kyle knows that he can see the gun. He's open carrying it. It's a rifle. It's huge. Therefore, he has to defend himself, and he has a reasonable expectation that some serious violence, serious bodily harm, or potential death is going to affect him or other people. The other attackers charged him from behind while he was running towards the police, hit him over the back of the head, hit him with the skateboard, tried to disarm him. They had no right to do so. People claim, oh, they thought he was an active shooter. That means they're in the wrong, and if they would have lived, they could have claimed an imperfect self-defense, but Kyle Rittenhouse was clearly running away towards the police line, and these people had no justification to disarm him. The other guy, Gage Grosskreutz, he came up with a gun, which, by the way, permit expired, was the illegal gun at the scene, and was pointing it at Kyle when Kyle shot him. And notice that Kyle Rittenhouse only used the amount of shots necessary to get him out of the situation. He wasn't just firing at everybody willy-nilly. He didn't kill Gage Grosskreutz. After he got shot and he left the situation, he was no longer a threat, and Rittenhouse moved on. And then he went to the police and attempted to surrender. The police, due to the confusion, went over to the scene, didn't realize who shot, so then Kyle turned himself in the Antioch Police Department, his hometown, that was 15 to 20 minutes away.
He shot, not only did he shoot people, not only make the decision, I'm going to go down there with a gun to protect property. And if I'm going down there with a gun, that means that if push comes to shove, I'm going to shoot people. And so whether he thought, oh, I may end up having to shoot somebody because people will see the gun and come at me because I've got a gun and they want to disarm me or they want to come. He's going into this situation with a gun, not for the express purpose of anything other than to protect property.
Yeah, Sam Seder throughout this trying to maintain that Kyle Rittenhouse shot people over property has no basis in reality. That being said, if you're somebody who believes that property isn't worth human life, then you should probably discourage rioters from destroying property, putting their lives at risk. Somehow, it's perfectly fine to risk your life trying to do the wrong thing, but all of a sudden when you defend yourself, then you're just killing people in defense of property. How dare he do that? Wow, 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 so terrible, so horrible. Also, Sam Seder contradicts himself in multiple places, like when he says, if you own the store, then somehow you have the right to defend it, but if you see somebody in danger, you can't defend them, because I guess defense of others is a concept that Sam Seder is not familiar with.
The second thing is the idea that he's killing people to defend property. That isn't true either. He didn't kill anybody in defense of property.
Why did he show up there with a gun?
Ostensibly, as you've said, to protect property.
Okay. What do you do with a gun to protect property?
You would shoot people.
Okay.
But he didn't shoot people protecting property. If I take a gun with me to a bar and I go to drink and somebody tries to assault me,
but if you go to a bar to protect the bar from people coming in, and you know there's people coming in, and you fire at them, I mean, that's what you're doing.
I agree if that was the case, but Rittenhouse wasn't shooting at people defending property. He shot at people that shot at him first and attacked him.
He's patrolling around with a gun.
Yeah, but that's you have a Second Amendment right in the United States to have a firearm, and that's his community as much as any other protester.
And if you need an example to show exactly why Sam Seder is so wrong and ridiculous in his assertion that Kyle was defending property, because his initial purpose there was allegedly, according to Sam Seder, the reason he brought the gun wasn't to defend himself, which it obviously was, and understandably so, was to defend property. Picture a security guard in a bank, somebody that is there to deal with potential robbers. Now, let's say the security guard has somebody who has it out for him. He came there specifically to kill him, walks up to him, pulls a knife on him, he's about to stab him, and the security guard draws his gun and then shoots the guy. Now, Sam Seder, by his logic, would say, oh, he shot somebody over the bank's money, even though this guy was clearly and obviously presenting him as a deadly threat to the security guard's person. The mere fact that he was there for the purpose of guarding the bank somehow makes his defense of himself a defense of the bank. That's absurd, that's stupid in every possible way, and of course what you would expect from somebody like Sam Seder. Now, I'm going to continue this video on into the future, maybe, and I'm going to cover the Citizens United portion of it if you guys are interested. Let me know down in the comments below, and maybe I'll do that. As for usual, if you liked the video, show me by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on all my social media, support me via the support links in the description box of this video. This has been me talking about Destiny trouncing Sam Seder. Till next time.